Today, we are sharing our top 10 tips for managing estimators. So just a little bit about Firestone Consulting Group. We help businesses achieve success by delivering results through action and accountability. We like getting in and working with electrical contractors and helping you to align your team, tune your processes, and ultimately increase your profits. Throughout the webinar today, we will be using the chat and the question and answer. So if you do have any questions, feel free to post that in the Q&A section there, and I will try to answer those as they come up. But there will be dedicated question and answer time at the end of the webinar where we can have you raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask your question live there. A few more housekeeping things. I'd like to thank our sponsor for the webinar today, McCormick Systems. McCormick Systems is the nation's leader in estimating and project management software with solutions for all sizes of contractors. From one-man shops to multi-million-dollar companies, McCormick will make your estimating and project management more efficient. As contractors transition to the digital age of construction, McCormick is right by your side with fully integrated systems for digital takeoff and estimating. You can visit McCormick's website at mccormicksys.com for more information. So with our webinar today, we're talking about tips on how to manage estimators. And the first question I have is, what does it mean to manage? Well, if we look at the dictionary definition of manage, is the act or art of conducting or supervising something. Well, since we're talking about estimators, really isn't something, but someone. So when we think about what it means to manage, these individuals, and I really like this definition where it's, the act and the art of supervising someone. Some of the other things that we might use to describe managing might be providing direction or providing guidance, overseeing the operation, and just overseeing that individual and helping them with their daily tasks. So again, it's really no science behind it, that there is, that art piece where we have to look at each of the different people that we're managing and figure out what works best for them. One of the most important things with managing estimators is, as the manager, we want to make sure that we know how to manage our time first. What you'll find is, as we start managing other estimators, and this could be as an estimating manager, or maybe you're a smaller company and you're the president of the company, it really doesn't matter what your title is or what your role is for the company. When you start managing others, you really are going to be far less efficient when those people rely on you for guidance. One of the things that we really want to do as we're a manager is make sure that we're avoiding frustrations. Well, what are some of the ways that we can do that? Well, we can set boundaries and, making sure that even though we have an open door policy, that there are some guidelines around when people can come in and interrupt, or if they see that we're working on something, that they stand there and make sure that we're at a stopping point before they start asking questions. Biggest thing we have to remember is we have other deadlines and responsibilities that we have to fulfill in our daily roles as managers, that we can't spend 100% of our time helping and guiding these other individuals. What we want to do is make sure that, looking at the chart that I have here, you can see is, as that estimator gets more experience, we want to begin to put more and more responsibility on them, and make sure that when they do come and ask you questions, or seek that guidance from you, that it's very pointed with the questions that they ask. And over time, we want to spend less time maybe hand holding and get them doing things on their own. Real quick, we're going to stop and do a quick poll. So this should pop up on your screen there, those of you that are connected via the web. If you would, 2 questions with this poll here. The first one is roughly how many hours a day do you work in a normal day? Again, don't think of your worst days or the worst weeks when you have multiple deadlines, but in a normal day, how many hours do you work? And then the second part of the question is looking at your time, how much of that is spent completing your own tasks versus helping others get their tasks completed. We'll wait a few more moments here and let some of you continue to respond. We're getting results all over the board here, so we'll kind of wait and see where that ends up. We'll wait about 10 more seconds because we have, just over half of you responded at this point. All right, we'll wait just a few more seconds here. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll end the polling here, and I'll go ahead and share those results. Hopefully everybody can see those, but we can see that majority of the folks that are participating here work somewhere between 8 and 10 hours a day, which we can see that there's some few more than that, but the bulk of everybody is right there in that 8 to 10 hours a day. Kind of surprising here is if we look at that distribution of how we're using our time and to get our tasks completed and helping others. It's pretty even across the board. Looks like the top one is 80% of our own and 20% of theirs, which really, as a manager, probably is the most effective way we can be operating is, at least getting 80% of that day spent on our own tasks and 20% on the others. I think some of those that are on the webinar here that maybe have multiple estimators that they're managing and have some less experienced and maybe some with a little bit more experience can see where maybe some of those less experienced estimators, we have to spend a little bit more of our time helping provide guidance, helping them learn and achieving success as estimators. But as we get more of those seasoned estimators, we can see that we have to spend less of our own time providing guidance for those estimators. So one of the other tips that we have here is, making sure that we're setting clear expectations for these estimators. And again, we talked with some of those less experienced estimators, we're going to have to provide maybe more guidance. But one of the biggest things that we need to remember is most people that I know can't read minds. I know there's some people that think that I'm supposed to be able to read their mind, but I haven't perfected that craft myself, and I'm assuming most of you haven't as well. But we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with the guidance that we're providing to them. When we look at that is, we're looking at the tasks and, how do we define what done looks like? Well, this is by setting expectations. And it's more than just giving somebody a to-do list, but we want to, identify who it is that's supposed to be getting that task done. What exactly is that task that they're supposed to be getting done? And when is that task supposed to be completed? And in some cases, we might even have to provide how that task is getting done. But most importantly, we want to make sure that we clearly define what the task is that is supposed to be completed. We may talk in more general terms and say that this takeoff needs to be completed by the end of next week, or it might be very specific that we want the lighting fixtures counted by the end of the day tomorrow. Again, we need to define what that what is, when we want it done. If we're working with a team on an estimate, maybe we have to identify who has the different responsibilities. And then as we're, developing maybe some of the less experienced estimators, we have to provide a little bit more guidance on the how of getting that task done. The next tip that we have is making sure that we're getting our message across. Communication is key, both with the estimator and with the estimate. And when I say with the estimator and the estimate, that might create a little bit of confusion. I think we understand, when we're talking about communicating with the estimator, it's that verbal communication and it's providing guidance, providing, the tasks that they need to be completing for that takeoff. Or maybe it's the bid review process. But when we say that we need to communicate with the estimate, really that estimator is the first person in your company that is working with those construction documents. So we want to make sure that they're communicating effectively with anybody else that may be using that set of plans or set of specifications. That could be the project manager, maybe it's your superintendent in the field. But what we need to do is make sure that not only do we have good verbal communication skills, but then we're also able to write and make notes on those drawings or in the specifications, or maybe you have some type of a formal form that you want your estimators to fill out to help convey that message that they have. What I like to describe is, in the estimating process, really we're telling a story of how this project's going to get built. And we have to be able to, as an estimator, relay that information to a project manager and ultimately to our electricians in the field that are getting that project completed. So again, this could be, the types of communication that we use during the takeoff process, but it could also be during that bid review or the project handoff, or even as the project is going, the questions that that project manager or that superintendent may have for the estimator. So how do we be a better communicator? Well, one of the most important things when we're communicating is making sure that we're listening first. That so many times as a manager, we focus on getting our message spoken or getting that email or that text message sent to the person that we want to have received that message. But sometimes we need to take that step back and listen a little bit more and see, truly, do they understand what it is that we're trying to convey to them? The second thing is what method should we use for communication? Is it something that we can do with verbal communication, or is it something that should be written? The second part to that is when we're looking at verbal communication, is it something that we can pick up the phone and get our message across just over a phone call? Or is it something that might be better to have a face-to-face conversation with that individual to make sure that we can see that they get that message that we're conveying to them? The second part with the written communication is it something that we can just send a quick text message, an email, or as we all know in construction, there's a lot of times that we need to have a little bit of CYA built into what we're doing. Maybe that written letter is more of a formal way of creating that documentation that we've done something. But whatever that is looking at the last bullet that I have on the screen here is, making sure that we seek to be understood and not heard. So many people speak and tell others what they want to do, but they don't stop and make sure that that individual truly understands what it is that we want them to accomplish. So, one thing that you can think about is your effectiveness as a communicator can be measured by how many times you have to repeat yourself. When I was managing estimators, kind of what I would explain to them is the better job we did describing how we had a project taken off, the notes that we made in the margins on the plans, the highlights that we made in the specifications, the information that we provided on some of the job information forms that we worked with. If we truly conveyed the message of how we took things off, what vendors we used for the pricing, when we handed that project over to the project manager, we could judge by how many phone calls, how many emails we were getting to ask, well, who did you use for the lighting package? Well, how did you run this feeder? Where if we could make those types of notes on the drawings and in those bid documents, there was far less questions that were asked of that project manager to the estimator. So again, it's not just verbal communication, but it's making sure that we know when to use verbal, when to use written, and that we are truly seeking to get our message across and not just providing that information. It's going beyond just being heard. We want to seek understanding. The next tip is, the bid date isn't the deadline. And what I mean by this is so many times the estimators are just focused on what that bid date is. But there's a lot of different things that we have going on in our day-to-day role as an estimator or as an estimating manager. But as that manager, we need to think about making sure that, not only, like we said before, that we're managing our time, but sometimes we need to provide that help and guidance to others to help manage their time. And just think about all the different distractions that we have in a given day, whether that's emails, phone calls. Right now we don't have a whole lot of sports going on, but during baseball season or football season, somebody wanting to come in and say, man, did you see that play last night? But it's all these different interruptions that we have that get us off track from getting our job done, that sometimes we need to help others better manage their time. And maybe that's helping them create their to-do list or putting reminders in their Outlook or Google Calendar. Maybe if you have a team of estimators, it's having some type of a weekly team meeting for planning and making sure that everybody knows what they need to get done this week, this day, when to ask if they need some additional help. One of the tools that I like to use with helping others manage their time is what I call chunking their time. And it's, looking at your day, and like we saw before, people are working, 8 to 10 hours a day. So maybe you help them create a to-do list that it's broke down into 30-minute or 15-minute sections and say, okay, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm going to check and respond to emails. From 10 a.m. to noon, I'm going to focus strictly on takeoff or inputting our takeoff into the estimating software, but help them kind of chunk their day into a little bit smaller and manageable tasks that they can work with. And that could be the emails, that could be, the takeoff, whatever that is. From this time to this time, you should be working on, and you can fill in the blank. When we look at, establishing the timeline, really as an estimator, so much of the focus is on the bid date, but we don't want to be working right up into the time of the when the bid's supposed to be submitted. We want to, look at that as what the deadline is and start working our way back to today and say, okay, well, we know we need to have a bid review. Let's have that a day or 2 days before the bid date. So that really becomes kind of that new deadline of when everything needs to be done for the estimate. And then we can start filling in everything on the timeline that we have. And of course, this timeline isn't all inclusive of everything that we would need to do on a typical job, but it's, some of those major milestones with making sure that we're getting our takeoff started and making sure that the takeoff's completed, getting quotes sent out, reviewing those quotes, having that bid review, ultimately working up to the bid date. One of the things that we need to think about, though, is, this is great, very linear if we only have one project that we're working with. But what happens if we have multiple projects or there's additional tasks that we have to do? How can we take and start merging these timelines and creating some of those daily, to-do lists and task lists of what that estimator needs to get done? And again, we can go clear back to, the very first tip that we had of being able to manage our own time. Again, as we're working with these maybe junior and less experienced estimators, we're probably going to have to spend a little bit more time helping them with that to-do list versus that senior estimator where you can hand them the project and they'll be able to establish this timeline on their own. The next tip is, as a manager, you don't have to be a know-it-all. Just because you're the manager doesn't mean that you do know everything. What I like to say is be a superhuman, not a superhero. And some of you are probably wondering what I mean by that. Well, why is it that you're the manager? Well, really it's because you're good at utilizing the company's resources to effectively and efficiently get things done. Not because you know all the answers or you're not the resident expert, but when we think about it, managing and utilizing resources, well, what is our number one resource? It's our people. So as a manager, we want to make sure that we're working to influence, inspire, coach, manage, and encourage these estimators that we have working for us to make sure that we're getting as much out of them as we possibly can, and making sure that that individual grows and can provide more value to the company. So as we look at building out our estimating team, one thing, and it's really important, is making sure that we're picking the right people. Hiring the right people, but remembering they don't have to know all of it on day one. Now, of course, if we're hiring a senior estimator or somebody that we're looking to have experience, we want them to maybe have that estimating and industry knowledge. But on day one, they're probably not going to know the ins and outs of your company's specific estimating process, or maybe the estimating software that you use, or, when the bid date is Thursday, what are the expectations for having that bid review? So again, they may have a larger skill set when it comes to estimating, but they're not going to know all the ins and outs of your business. Whereas we look at the other end of that spectrum and we look at um, maybe an inexperienced estimator, there's some, if you're looking at bringing an intern in, they may understand some general construction principles of, maybe it's a construction management student from a university or somebody from a community college, but the likelihood of them knowing how all the different parts and pieces that we use to build a project go together and what are some of the accessories that we need for different things, they're probably not going to have a real good understanding of what all those parts and pieces are to truly be able to do a complete takeoff. So we need to make sure that we're finding the right people, but have an understanding that they're probably not going to know everything on day one. So when we're looking at the people that we want to bring in on our team, and in this case, I'm talking our estimating team, a couple of great books that are out there, really are focused around, as Jim Collins says, get the right people on the bus. Are the people that you're looking for going to be fit with your company culture? Are they going to be a good fit for your company with how you operate? And, the second one there, the ideal team player, Patrick Lencioni, kind of takes it a step further, and it's, are they humble? Are they hungry? And are they smart? The smart one's the pretty easy one. Do they have the skills? Do they have the capability of getting those skills? But when we look at, the hungry part of it is do they have that drive? Do they want to get better? Do they want to be able to provide more value to the company? And then the humble part is, are they willing to adapt and be part of a team, whether that's an estimating team, or if you look at it from your whole company standpoint, are they humble? Are they willing to work with each other and not have this persona that they know and are better than anybody else? And that humble one might be a little bit more difficult if you hire a more seasoned or a more senior estimator to your team. They're going to have some wins in their career and probably have a little bit of an ego that goes with that they know what they're doing, that they are good at the skill of estimating, but we want to make sure that they are still going to be a good fit for our organization. The next tip is, as we build this team, is we want to make sure that we're continuing to develop and educate these estimators. And this is through maybe additional training, additional education. Right now there's a lot of people that are working from home. We have a number of people that are participating in this webinar that, maybe it's to develop themselves, but hopefully they're taking some of these ideas of how they can develop their people. But it's finding those times where we can go out there and, attend classes. Maybe it's on codes, or maybe it's a webinar on new lighting control products. But it's trying to make sure that we're developing and training our estimators and getting them better. Yeah, continue to do takeoffs and bids and those type of things. You get the experience, you get the reputation, but it's not really enhancing that skill set. So how do we, look at getting our team better? Well, as the manager, that kind of falls on you as the responsibility of making sure that you're, pushing your team to strive and get better. And one of the questions I have for everybody is, what happens if we just maintain the status quo? Well, we know that, things are moving fast in this day and age, whether it's with technology and how technology is being adapted into construction. And we want to make sure that, if we maintain that status quo, we're probably just going to coast along. Now, I'm not implying that we need to be on the cutting edge of technology and make sure that we are using the latest tools and techniques out there, but we want to make sure that we have that mindset of growing and making sure that we are striving to get better. Some of you may be familiar with the term Kaizen, and this is a Japanese term, and Toyota really embraced this. But what it means is, we're looking at a process of planning or establishing, what those objectives are to get better. The do part of it is completing that plan. And then the check part is gathering the data and the results, evaluating and making any adjustments or changes to that plan. And then the act is actually implementing those adjustments. And this just becomes a continual cycle. So this could be, broken down to the most basic level, looking at our estimating process and making sure that we are being efficient, we are being effective with how we get that project taken off. What are some of the tools that can allow us to get more projects bid in a shorter amount of time? Well, of course, using computers and software and some of the technologies there, using things like an on-screen estimating or an on-screen takeoff program that eliminates some of those steps, because we find that the more steps that we have in our processes lead to potential errors and mistakes. So we want to make sure that we're looking at how do we complete this cycle, and maybe it's looking at it to the next step of, okay, we bid this project, here's what our costs were at bid time, now we built the project, what is your process of completing that circle and looking at how we performed on the project to how we estimated the project and making those adjustments so that we can improve that estimating process the next time. So, one of the things when we're looking at this, how we develop and educate and encourage our employees is, really what we need to stop and think about is, what are the things that our estimators are struggling with? Is it skills that they just need additional training? Is it knowledge that, maybe they could attend some webinars? Maybe there's courses that they can take. Maybe they don't understand some of the code things that they need to incorporate in their takeoff. Maybe it's just learning more about your organization. And of course that comes into play with people that you hire from outside the organization and just really don't know the ins and outs of how your company works. And one of the other things is maybe it's just confidence. And again, some of that's going to come with time. But as a manager, what are the things that we should be doing to help our estimators that maybe are struggling with some of these different areas? And like we said before, we just need to take that step back and listen a little bit. And sometimes it's not so much listening with our ears as it implies, but it's, having those check-ins with our estimator and making sure that they truly understand what it is that they're trying to do and that they're striving to get better. When we look at some of these different, maybe struggles or areas for development of our estimators, as the manager, we need to look at, what are some of these that can be taught and what are some of them that as a manager, maybe we need to have a little bit more of that coaching relationship to help them through things like confidence and maybe it's just they struggle with getting deadlines met. So as the manager, we have to figure out what the best approach is for developing our estimators. So with that, we have another poll here. So I want to pull that up real quick and we'll have everybody having some technical difficulties here. See if we can, here we go, employee development. All right, so again, a couple questions here. Those of you that are logged in via the web, if you would, just the first question, does your company have an employee development program? Couple different responses there. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how well does your company stack up to making sure that your team is getting better? We'll wait a minute here and let everybody have a chance to respond to the poll. We'll give it another 10 or so seconds here. Have the majority of individuals responded. All right, if you haven't yet, go ahead and get your vote in here on this, and we'll go ahead and end the polling right now. And hopefully you can see those on your screen. A little bit kind of all across the board there with, does your company have a training program? Those of you that do have a program, especially those with a formal training program, way to go. Just like with any goal, if we don't have something written down, it's really hard to make sure that everybody's adhering to the same program there. Those of you that have one, but maybe it isn't very current, great opportunity right now when things are maybe a little bit slower to try to revamp and bring some of those things up to date. Then when we look at the scale below there, everybody kind of thinks maybe middle of road. Some of you up to the top there, I guess one out of everybody thinks that their program is pretty good. So I'd love to chat with that individual offline and just hear a little bit more about what it is that you've done and what you've learned from developing that program. So our next tip with estimators, and this is one here where I think as managers, we struggle with it a little bit sometimes, but one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is we don't want to be pointing fingers. And this, again, this isn't necessarily just an estimating manager thing. It doesn't matter what your role is within the organization. And it's hard for us to swallow this pill sometimes, but we need to have the mindset of, mistakes are learning opportunities, not only for the estimator, but for you and your team. To me, when we have these mistakes in that estimate, that should be that red flag that we see that says, we need to adjust our process, or we need to adjust our training program to make sure that we don't have this gap in our process. My mindset is every estimate has an error. What we need to do is find that error before it becomes a mistake, and we get our bids sent out to that general contractor or that owner. A second set of eyes is always best on that project. I can think of multiple times that I've looked through takeoffs and you get so ingrained with that you can convince yourself, yep, these numbers are right. Somebody else looks at it and like, well, this number here doesn't look right. So we make those changes. When it comes to the pointing fingers, errors, mistakes, one of the worst things that we can do as a manager with estimators, when we start pointing fingers and we start accusing them of leaving something out, and I've experienced this firsthand, well, just like with anybody, when you get reprimanded or you get your butt chewed for making a mistake, what are you going to do the next time? Well, you're going to do everything you can to make sure that you don't get your butt chewed and you don't get reprimanded. So you're going to add a little bit more into your takeoff. Maybe, you're wheeling off a feeder and you're going to let your scale master go a few more clicks just to be safe. Or you're going to add a little bit more when you round. And instead of, rounding at 5 to the next, tens or something like that, oh, I'm at 83 feet. I'm going to go ahead and call this one 100 feet just to make sure I'm covered. Well, when we start putting too much of that fluff in the estimate, I think we're all, going to come up with the same answer. The more fluff we put in there, the less likelihood we are of getting that project and being awarded that bid. So we want to make sure that, we look at it as a learning mistake and figure out what caused that mistake and how we can rectify it before it happens again. One of the most important things as a manager is, a lot of times we use manager as titles. We don't have, a project leader as a title or an estimating leader as a title. It's a project manager or an estimating manager. But really, as a manager, we need to be a leader and think, a lot more like a leader thinks. Managers tend to get focused on the mechanics and, this is exactly how we need to do things. But as a leader, we're really striving to move things forward. And that could be improving our processes, improving our training program, completing that, kind of project cycle of getting the project done and comparing that to the estimate and making sure that we're making those adjustments where we need to make them so that we are providing that best estimate. And then we can go in and actually bid the project accordingly. So when we look at the difference between me being a manager and being a leader is, really it boils down to success. And how is it that you are, driving success with your team? Maybe if you're just the only estimator, how are you driving your own success and making sure that, you know, you're looking down the road and you're improving? You know, as a leader, we need to make sure that, you know, if we have a team of estimators, we need to know when to push them a little bit more. We need to know when we need to get out in front of them, reach back and pull them along. And sometimes it's a matter of putting on our gloves, getting our hands a little bit dirty in the trenches with them, and making sure that they see, you know, as a manager, as a leader, that we're right there with them, striving for their success as well. So some of the things that we could ask ourselves as a manager is, you know, does my team have the resources to get the job done? Am I challenging the estimators on our team? Am I approachable and willing to help? How am I measuring performance and improvement? Again, this is one of the probably the most important ones is, you know, we need to have some concrete measurements that we're using to judge that improvement, figure out where we are today and how we're going to improve, you know, moving forward. And then one of the last ones here is, am I providing timely and meaningful feedback? You know, so many people do annual reviews with their employees, and there's a lot that happens in those 365 days in between each one of those reviews. So if there is something that, you know, somebody does well or something that somebody needs to improve upon, having that timely and meaningful feedback beyond just an annual review or quarterly review definitely is going to get those behaviors changed and make sure that we are striving for that success with our department. And the last tip that we have here is kind of bringing all this together, and it's, you know, making sure that we have a estimating process that we all are adhering to. You know, I guess the analogy I use is, you know, a road trip can be a lot of fun if we don't have a map, and so can that estimating process without having that formal process in place. You get into situations where you have different people doing their takeoffs different ways. And if something happens to one of those individuals, how is somebody going to pick up where they left off and complete that estimate? Or as a manager, if you have 4 or 5 people, and whether that's an estimator or estimator, project manager, whoever it is, but they all do it kind of their own way, how do you bring it all together at the end and make sure that they truly have the costs accounted for in their estimate and that you can be as competitive as possible when you submit that bid? So with having a formal process in place, it gets everybody on the same page and making sure that everybody's accounting for all the different parts and pieces that we have. We've looked at all the you know, direct job expenses and, you know, some of those other costs that aren't, you know, directly associated with the installation of the material, but getting all of us, you know, headed in that same direction. So some of the things, you know, with having a formal process is that it improves efficiency, creates better communication. Again, this is with the estimator, the manager, with the project managers, with the field personnel. It creates accountability, eliminates errors, and it has measurable outcomes. And one of the more important things is everybody's on the same page. And with this process, it allows for scalability. As we bring on additional people onto our team, or we bring other people into that estimating role, if we have this process in place, it makes it a lot easier for that onboarding and that scalability of it. So there's, you know, some great books out there on, you know, process design and implementation. A few of them that I have on the screen here: Traction, E-Myth, the Toyota Way, Scaling Up, Checklist Manifesto. Again, these are books that are just kind of talking about you know, the importance of processes. Some of them give some guidance on how to develop those processes. And this isn't just specific to estimating. There's a lot of other aspects of our business that we could benefit from having some type of a formal process. So one last poll here that I want to do, and we'll get that pulled up on the screen real quick here. And this is just asking, you know, does your company have an estimating process or procedure? Again, similar to the training question there. But, you know, you can see kind of the different levels of, you know, how formal is that process. So we'll give everybody a minute or two. Well, not even a minute or two. We'll give everybody a few seconds here to get their responses in, and then we'll show those responses. All right, we'll give everybody about 5 more seconds here. All right, we'll go ahead and look at that. So as everybody can see there, most companies do have some type of an estimating process. Some not a formal one. Definitely glad nobody responded unsure on that one. Those of you that did, or if somebody had, we definitely would want to talk offline on that. But I think again, maybe some of you can start looking at seeing maybe why there is an importance behind having that process. And if you don't have it written down, or you're not sure that you have one, or maybe you don't even have one at this point, again, now would be a great time to start documenting that. And it doesn't have to be this elaborate matrix of, you do this and then the yes no answers. It can be a real simple, here's the 10 steps to our estimating process. But what we want to do is make sure that we do have that formal process, so everybody knows what is expected of them, and we create something that is scalable. So, when we look at this here, kind of bringing everything together, we talked about, the process kind of brings that all together. But what we really want to do is look at what are some of the actions that we can take, from this webinar here. So the question I have for you is, what are your next steps, or what is that next step that you're going to take? What we want to do is achieve some type of result. And to do so, we have to have action with that. How can you put this information to use in your own company? And how can you adapt this list to other aspects of your business? So just real quick to recap, the top 10 tips, first and foremost is managing our own time, setting clear expectations for our estimators, making sure that we're effectively getting our message across, looking at the different ways that we can communicate. The bid date isn't the deadline. And what we were talking with tip 7 here is, sometimes we have to step in and help others manage their time and create those task lists and to-do lists. Number 6, you don't have to be a know-it-all. Again, we want to coach and encourage and build up our team, that we're not in that management role because we know all the answers. We're in that management role because we're able to get the most out of people. We're able to take those resources and really effectively and efficiently use those to achieve some type of goal or success. We want to make sure that we're getting the right people on our team. Again, this is something that is beyond just the estimating. And for some of you, maybe you do use estimator project managers, that you don't have, individuals that are pure estimators. So how are we looking to make sure that we find the individuals with the right skill set? And some of that is we can develop some of those skills. We can take what somebody knows from previous work experience and adapt it to how our company works. But it's that continuous development and education of our estimators. One of the other things that we talked about is, making sure that we're not pointing fingers, that we need to learn from our mistakes, and look at that as, a learning opportunity, that we, whatever the cost of that mistake is, and hopefully it isn't a large one, but that we just invested in the future of our company. And we need to figure out how we can adjust our processes or procedures to make sure that we don't have that same mistake again. Again, we want to be more than a manager. We want to look at being a leader and how we're going to drive things forward. And then, of course, the last one that wrapped everything together is, how do we develop that estimating process? And if we look at that estimating process, really it's all the other 9 tips that we have kind of rolled up into one main thing. And it's, in that process, we're defining, what are those expectations? We're defining, what is that message? What do we want people to do? We're setting deadlines. We're figuring out ways that we can develop and educate and scale what our estimators are able to do. So with that process, it kind of brings all this together and make sure that we have a step-by-step way of being more efficient with our estimating. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any questions. Those of you that are familiar with Zoom, there's an option in the toolbar at the bottom that you can raise your hand if you have a question you would like to ask. And then if you would like to type in your question, you can do that in the Q&A. And I do have a question that just popped up here. Yes, I will be posting the presentation. So I recorded the webinar. There will be a link on our website that you can watch that webinar. And there will also be the ability to download a PDF of the slides. So go ahead and you can see it on the screen there, firestonecg.com. Probably won't have it up there today, but we'll have it up there by the end of the week. So those of you that would like a copy of the webinar or the slides, please visit our website and you can download that there. Again, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or post them in the Q&A. You know, as waiting for more questions to pop up. Again, we want to thank our sponsor today, McCormick Systems. Feel free to reach out to them at their website, mccormicksys.com. If you have specific questions that you would like to ask us offline, our web address is on the screen there, as well as our phone number. Feel free to reach out with any specifics that you have. We do have a contact us form on the website. Fill that out and we will get back to you. Question that was posted here is, do you have any tips for turnover between estimators and project managers? And I would say, you know, again, it's having that process, having some type of a procedure that you do each and every time. And maybe it's creating some type of a checklist, and it doesn't have to be real extensive, but it's making sure that, you know, you identify, well, what is the information that you want the project managers to have from the estimator. And that's kind of how you build that checklist to make sure that you don't leave anything off of that list. And as, you know, small as a project is, or, you know, even your biggest projects, make sure that you're using that same checklist each and every time to make sure that you don't leave any of those steps out. So hopefully, Darren, that answered your question. If not, you can raise your hand and we can get you on here live, and we can have a little bit of a dialogue there. Next question is, how do you deal with vendors and quotes that come in way too late? Well, Carl, if it makes you feel any better, with every one of the contractors that we've had the opportunity to work with around the country, that's an issue that everybody is dealing with. You know, one of the things that I like to do when I was involved in the bidding process is we wanted to have as much of that estimate completed as we possibly could. So all we were dealing with on bid day were those quotes. And then what we tried to do is work with our vendors to maybe get a bill of material for the gear a day or two in advance. So all we were worried about on bid day was just the number, making sure that we were having those conversations with the lighting reps to make sure that they were providing a specified fixture package, or let us know enough ahead of time if they were going to be providing a alternate package, so that we weren't analyzing anything more than just the numbers at the very end or right before bid day or bid time. One of the other questions we have here, does your company assist in setting up formal estimating procedures? Paul, yes, we definitely do. If you would go to the website there, fill out the contact us form, and I'd be happy to connect with you offline and discuss a little bit more about what it is that you would like to accomplish there, and be happy to have that conversation. I'm not seeing any. Okay, so I got another one here. Any suggestions on how to develop a formal plan? And again, Timothy, what we're looking at there is, anytime we're developing that plan or that procedure, we want to define, what it is that we want to accomplish at the end. But then, some of the things that we're identifying in that, formal plan would be who's responsible for what. When are the deadlines? Who has the authority to make different decisions? If we're dealing with less experienced estimators, we probably don't want them putting the final number on the project. So who else needs to get involved in that process? I know some people, they like identifying what crew they're going to use in the field to get that job completed if they are awarded it. So maybe that's part of that bid review process, of having that superintendent be involved in that. Maybe for a larger project, it's identifying, hey, at this level, the project manager can make the decision. At this dollar amount, we need to bring in the vice president or president of the company. But it's really identifying, what are those steps that we want to get completed? Who's going to be responsible for each of those steps? When are those steps going to be completed? And then kind of look at how they, it kind of goes back to the slide. What does done look like? Well, when we get to the end of step one, when can we start step two? And just kind of create that. It's almost like a checklist that we're creating of making sure that we're looking at all the steps. So I know that was a little bit of a wordy response there, but hopefully that helped answer your question. Again, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I will go ahead and I'll put it out here in the chat for those of you that have your chat window up. I will put my email address in there. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Avoid the step of using the contact us form if you would like, but it is just mdf@firestonecg.com. Or you can feel free to call us at 402-817-1420. Oh, we got a comment here. Every bid submission requires multiple forms to be submitted with the bid. Yeah, so, Jim there, I think he's stating, but then, I don't know if there's a question with that. With all these different forms, again, having these checklists, having these procedures, make sure that we're including everything that we need to with that bid. Maybe it's a bid form. Maybe it's, I've seen projects where we have to supply resumes with it. Maybe it's making sure that we have that bid bond submitted with it, making sure that it's addressed to the right individual. But yeah, having that built into that process or that procedure of making sure that we have all the different forms and pieces of paper that we have to submitted with that. All right, we'll, I guess we've been at our 60 minutes. I'm happy to stick around if we have a few more questions here. I'm not seeing a whole lot come through, but I'll wait a few more seconds here and see if any additional questions come through. But I would like to thank everybody for taking your time today. We had people from the East Coast clear to Hawaii. So some of you, it's early in the morning. Some of you, it's early in the afternoon. But I'd like to thank everybody that did participate in the webinar today. Hopefully you took some value from this and find ways that you can implement this into your business. We'll see no more questions. We'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you, everybody.